So I just wanted to take a look at why I don't really like the Title Update 5 buff to skill power and basically to skill mods more specifically. When you have skill builds, obviously we all know that you have to have a very intricate design to make them to keep them from being overpowered or to keep them from being too weak and just useless. To have really strong usable skills constantly, you need to invest heavily so you'd have a very low cooldown. But there is also a couple different ways you could invest in it depending on what you really needed or wanted your skills to be. Well, what we got with this patch was we got a decrease in all the cooldown times for skills, massive decrease in cooldown time, and we got a huge increase to our skills duration, which basically means that you don't really need to run any sort of duration mods anymore. You don't need to run any sort of duration talents on your gear, which basically killed that kind of build. Basically just ruined that investment. So those talents are now kind of useless. There's still a few choices that you could make where it might possibly be beneficial, but for the most part, you wouldn't need it for the turret anymore. You wouldn't need it for the drone anymore. I mean, you don't really need it for the chem launcher, or definitely don't need it for any of these, quicker skills. Definitely don't need it for the Seeker Mine, especially the healing variant for the Seeker Mine. You don't need it for that because they all just got a huge increase in their duration. They all last 300 seconds or more now, which is a really long time for most fights. So adding more duration, useless. They've basically ruined that. With the cooldowns, that was one of the things that differentiated a true skill build from basically just somebody who's using random skills. Well, now all the skills are pretty much 60 seconds or less, with the majority falling in the 40-second range. With the cooldowns being so low now, you don't even really need to invest into skill haste. You can just have skill power and basically just max out the damage on something like a drone, or max out something like the damage on a Seeker, and reach that 1 million damage really easily without even having a full skill build. You can reach max damage without even having really much investment into skills at all now. And it makes it so much easier for non-skill builds. So when you have a meta build or something akin to the 377 style build with spotter on the ropes and compensated, it just makes it even easier for those builds. You can just invest into your 7 or 8 yellow stats directly into skill power, and you can reach 2,500 or 3,000 skill power, and then get those max mods on something like the bomb drone while also having some of the highest DPS in the game. That's why, in a nutshell, I do not like what they did with the skill power mods. I don't like the skill mods, and I haven't liked them since the beginning, just because they're so simple and linear. You don't really need much investment that just scales upwards. So you have, at 1,000 you have this percentage, and at 2,000 you have double that. It's not a fun, enjoyable system. I don't really care for it. I don't like it. It doesn't seem like it benefits skill builds particularly well, especially since if you're a full skill build at max, you might be able to get some skills that can kill a fully armored, fully health player. Some of these not even maxed out skill power builds, some of these 377 builds, they can easily get skills that can one-tap a skill build because the skill build has less health. I don't like it because it takes away the variety. It takes away the uniqueness of builds. And yeah, you can say, well, people are using more skills now, so it's more diverse. Well, okay, maybe more skills are being tested out right now, but I don't think that's going to stay around for very long. There's going to be some that just stop getting used altogether, and it's going to go back to the way it was before. But we're still going to be left with the mess of skills being so easy to make good for non-skill build that it just basically, there's no point in running a true skill build. And that's the problem that this game has had since launch. There is no desire to make a truly maxed out one-sided build, right? There is no true all red stat build. There is no true all blue stat build. There is no true all yellow stat builds. There's no benefit in any of these builds. You can only get so much skill power before it becomes useless. The only skills that really provide a strong use for a maxed out skill build would be a Seeker Mine and a drone, just because they're pretty much single use and fire and forget kind of. When you have long uptimes on your skills, like a really long lasting turret, as a skill build you don't get much benefit out of it because you don't really get that instant damage that comes back. You still have this slow trickle of damage. The bomb drone and the Seeker Mine, the shorter your cooldowns, the stronger your mods, better and faster it works for you. For a maxed out skill build to function properly, they're limited to these very unique, very specific skills, especially the very specific variants of those skills. The other issue that I have is that it gives everything, again, to the I don't even want to call it a hybrid build because it's not a hybrid build. It's a product of this stupid design of the game's talents and the game's mods and the game's skills in general. One, when you look at the mask, there was really nothing to invest in, especially now. So Spotter becomes pretty much the default for any build, and all you need is 5 yellows to get 20% weapon damage. And again, then when you use it with On the Ropes, which you already have 5 for the Spotter, all you need is 2 more for On the Ropes, and you get 25% damage when your skills are on cooldown. Right there, you're starting at 45% damage for no investment into red stats. And then you get compensated, which actually deliberately gives you 15% more damage for having 3 or less red stats, specifically telling you avoid the red stats and we'll give you more damage. Now you're up to 60% extra damage just by having no red stats. Now, it gets even worse with this patch, because what they did with Spotter was basically buff it incredibly. And you may be wondering, well, how did they buff it? Well, with the way Pulse works now, so basically everyone got a shorter cooldown on their Pulse, even non-skill builds. They got a much easier time to activate it, because now as soon as you use it, it starts counting down on its cooldown timer with very little investment needed for a pulse mod, right? You don't really need too much, and there's not really too much choice here. I mean, you can either go directly into skill haste and get, a 10-second or less, or you can go for a longer duration so that you have it basically up every time, all the time. I just keep clicking out Pulse. I don't even need to take a break from it, and I just have that 20% damage, I got that 25% damage, I got that 15% damage, and I don't need to worry about red stats. But here's the worst part. There's very few red stats that actually add damage. You have the chest, the gloves, and the backpack. So if you have a fully maxed out 377 build, you have a red stat on your chest, you have a red stat on your gloves, and you have a red stat on your backpack, which gives you basically that 30 to 40% damage buff in addition to your 60%. So then when you take a look at, well, what can an actual true red stat build invest into? Well, you can invest in some crit chance or damage to elites, which for a PvP build, not obviously worth it. I mean, you don't really want too much crit because it's not really worth it at the end of the day. But again, there's not really too much you can invest in. I mean, you can add in some headshot damage. That's basically about it. Like, you can't add too much, and there's not too many more stats that you can add it onto. So I mean, if you really want it to be effective, you could add crit chance on your holster, your knee pads, your backpack, and your mask, and possibly on your chest piece. If you really wanted to put all the red stats on there possible, you could. But again, you get punished for the more stats that you have. And this problem comes along because you get punished for the more stats that you actually have on your gear. If you use something like the Petrov Defense Group holsters, you have 3 stats that all share the same exact stat pool. So basically your stats can't roll higher than something with 1 stat. Your stats are going to be basically spread out. So it doesn't really provide a huge bonus, which is why when you run a 377 build, it's so beneficial to this problem, because you can invest in one single really strong red stat on each of these pieces. You can roll 1 red stat here and be really, really powerful. You can roll 2 stats here and basically be even more powerful. And if you had the best rolls, it's really easy, because all those stats, armor and weapon damage, is pretty much what you want. You would get a really high really high weapon damage and a really high armor. And that's exactly what you get on your chest piece. You'd get a really high damage, really high armor, and that would basically negate any need to have a build like this using the Sokolov, where you would basically split your weapon damage among 3 other red stats, or among 4 other red stats. And the downside again is also that you lose a lot of your mod slots for this. So you get basically weaker main stats, and then you lose mod slots. That's basically my problem with skills. It just feels like this patch deliberately went into the realm of making an actual absolute skill build less beneficial and less enticing than any other build. Yes, skills got buffed and skills are improved, but it's this stupid general improvement for everyone that doesn't really reward having a dedicated investment into skill power. Now, I'm not saying that you should invest into all skill power and be a super god. No. But your skills should come with benefits that show that you have that much investment into skill power. Unfortunately, the game and I think the developers seem hell-bent on basically making everything just a gray mush, where it's like nothing really stands out, nothing is really interesting, and nothing is really diverse. Everything is just in this bland little zone of not too strong, not too weak, no real point in going outside of it because everything outside of it is trash. That's really what it seems like from the devs, and it's really unfortunate because I think, you know, if you had skills that could really become unique and really become interesting, and you may be wondering, what do I mean by different, or what do I mean by unique? Let's just take some simple theoretical mods, right? For the turret, it has an unlimited range, but its accuracy sucks. So why can't we get a accuracy mod? Why cannot we get a range mod or a increased arc mod, increased rotation mod for the flame turret? Or even better yet, why can't we get like a flame grenade for the artillery turret? Some sort of large explosion, but it covers the area and fire for a short period of time. Kind of like the old airburst seeker. Because when you look at some of these things, the investments are fairly obvious. You invest into damage and skill haste, or you invest into freaking radius and skill haste, or you invest into healing and skill haste, or you invest, like, everything's the same. There's no real need to invest into almost any of these mods. Some of them are just too low, too weak, and too crappy to fucking even be worth it. Just consider that. Like, why would I want 12% duration when I could choose something, you know, like 100% skill haste? I mean, that's even less skill power. 100% skill haste versus 12% duration. That's dumb. You have something like the Oxidizer, which it only has one round of ammunition. Same thing with the rifle, 1 round of ammunition. So what are you going to invest into? You're going to invest into ammo. Guaranteed at least 1 slot for ammo, which basically means that there's even less variety for it. That's the problem. Like, there's so little diversity and selection. There's so little, like, options that you would actually want to use. There's no point in using half of these mods. Half of these mods are terrible. Radius is incredibly small and weak. Damage is not really worth it because just the skills themselves are not strong enough. And they just provide no real difference between any other builds. I mean, everyone's going to be running the same exact mods pretty much on all their gear. Leave a comment down below telling me what you think of Title Update 5 so far. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you wish it was something else? Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one.